for me, it's like, I like seeing other people achieve things they didn't think was possible.
Mm-hmm.
I like having people believe in things that are bigger than themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I look back at OWN was a complete, you know, was a problem. You know, when I was running XM, it was a startup, and no one thought we ever could get people to pay for radio, and we did. And when we built that company, it was the same way. And then all the radio stations and all the country stuff, they were all like, you can't go at 23 to move to Seattle and be this. You can't do. And so a lot of my pathology in my life had been, you can't. And what I realized was I was proving something to myself. But then what I actually realized, that the joy came from actually watching other people see things that they can't see, having them believe in the fact that we could do this and believe in the fact that we were going to do this. And then seeing that happen was like more fulfilling to me than anything else.
I believe that each and every one of us has the power within ourselves to create the life that we really want. And I want to help give you the tools to make that happen. I'm Danica Patrick, and I'm pretty intense. Today, we have the very inspirational Erik Logan on the podcast. He is the CEO of the World Surf League, formerly president of the OWN Network, and vice president of Harpo Studios when Oprah was in Chicago. The way he looks at business and life is so much beyond just sort of maybe the quintessential, like the way you'd think of a CEO or a businessman being about like numbers and go, go, go. I mean, there's go and there's numbers, but before that, there's the mindset of what it is that you want to accomplish, and then the true and utter belief needed to make it happen. Like there's a difference between wanting to do something, thinking about doing something, and truly believing like down through your bones that something is going to happen and work and be successful. And so Erik is a great storyteller. He's totally open. He's really funny, and has taken on this really cool new job of being CEO of the World Surf League, which is such a transition. So I, of course, wanted to know all about how you go from being the president of OWN Network to running a surf league. So we're going to hear today all about his, what he would call church. How did an Oklahoma boy fall in love with surfing? Doesn't seem to go together.
It doesn't. You don't. It's not a poster you have in your house when you grow up of like, you know, you have basketball players. You don't have like surf people that's in there. It's an interesting story. So when I moved to Los Angeles to run the network for Oprah, I had moved to Manhattan Beach and lived in Manhattan Beach with my two daughters. And ultimately, at a certain point, you just kind of cave to the whole environment that happens. And so I get, as a joke, a wetsuit as a joke. Now, mind you, grew up in Oklahoma, had never properly learned how to swim, was afraid of the water, afraid of the sharks, afraid of everything that goes in there. And so I got a wetsuit as a joke. It's okay, whatever. So I put this wetsuit on and I wander out into the ocean. And it was the most bizarre, comforting, and even, you know, powerful surrendering feeling I'd ever had in my life. Because you felt insulated and protected because you could feel the water, but it wasn't cold. And it was just like really sort of
so
surreal.
No board yet, just the suit. You're just talking about the relationship with the suit and the
just
feeling.
Me and the relationship with the water.
Wow.
And so then you look around and you see, okay, there's these people that are like on boards and boogie boards. So I'm like, okay, I got an idea. So I'll go buy a boogie board. Now, mind you, I'm 41 at the time. Okay, 41 years old. So most people who are boogie boarding are under the age of 7.
Yep, that's what I've seen.
So I say, this is going to be really interesting. So I go grab a boogie board, and all of a sudden I'm having fun with a bunch of rando 7, 8-year-olds in Manhattan Beach. You can imagine the looks from the parents looking at this grown man now boogie boarding on the beach with all of these kids.
Curiosity and concern.
That's right. They're Googling my name on like predator websites and shit. Right. And there like, really? What do you? So I look up, I get back, I go, all right, so I really need to try surfing. So I take one surf lesson from a guy who I'm still a friend with and I still surf with to this day.
Really?
His name is Taylor Hine. Yep.
Huh.
It was just a random thing on Camp Surf. And
Camp Surf, what's that?
It was just, you type it, surf lessons in Google. It was the first thing that popped up, and it was this little local surf company in South Bay, here in California. And he shows up, by the way, 15 minutes late, right out of central casting, sunglasses, hat on backwards, completely ripped, six pack, tats, the whole thing.
So he was California on time.
100%. I mean, he did not think he was late whatsoever. So I took my first lesson, jumped up he put me on a huge thing. We call them barn doors. They're like gigantic boards that like anybody could stand up on. It caught my first wave. It literally changed my life. It was, you felt, it was like, what was this feeling that I had? Got out of the water, drove to a surf shop and bought my first board. And then, as we like to say, as a fan of The Matrix, follow the white rabbit, took the red pill, and down the rabbit hole I go. And then nowhere on the sort of vision board of my life did I ever think it would take me traveling the world, meeting all these people. And now I get to a place where I'm, the CEO of the World Surf League. It's kind of crazy.
So full circle.
So yeah, I don't even know where on the circle I'm at. If it's full or if I'm like halfway through, I don't even know where I'm at on the circle. But it's a pretty interesting journey.
Time and space don't really matter. I mean, if you like The Matrix, then you're probably into a little esoteric thinking yourself. What you said, it's the it's the red pill. Where did that go? What happened next?
So what happened to me on my journey into the ocean was more of a spiritual transformation for my life. And what was so interesting for me was that, prior to that point in time, for the past 4 years before that, I was, the president of Harpo. So I was running the Oprah Winfrey show for Oprah. We were syndicating the show. We had started the cable network, it owned out here in Los Angeles, but I was still living in Chicago with the studio. And we hadn't really shut down the company yet. We were shutting down Harpo. So May 25th, 2011, we did it. So I've been around, obviously, at, I would consider one of the highest levels in terms of like enlightenment, spirituality, and just being in her presence. It's like, I don't know if there's a higher vibration.
Super Soul Sunday sort of really opened me up.
It was it's a beautiful thing. And for me, it was like, okay, I'm running the company. I understand it. I'm around it. I see all the people in the sphere. It connected with me, but it never really moved me like it moves most people. And what was interesting was I started finding all these lessons that was happening to me in the ocean, and I was connecting these dots. I was having all these aha moments. It'd be like I'm stuck on the inside, getting pummeled, and you learn about surrender, stop fighting the ocean, and go on all these things. And so there was one conversation in particular where, when I came back from a trip, I had this really scary moment, out on a reef in Fiji, and I was telling Oprah about it. And she literally was just smiling, and I talked for like 20 minutes, and she said, "You have found your spiritual calling." I go, "What?" And so all of our conversations about surfing were about the linkages, about the metaphors of ocean, tides, currents, life, love, everything.
Analogy for life.
And from that, it opened me up in a way that I'd never been opened up before. And here I was sitting next to her for many, many years, but surfing was the thing that I never knew I wanted to do. It was a passion I never knew I thought I'd have. And it clicked everywhere. So much so, there's a fun little anecdotal story about that every morning, no matter what the conditions were, I get up at dawn, I drive to the beach, and I'm in the ocean. It's like this morning, as soon as the light's up, I'm out on the water. So there was a conference call one morning that she had called. She was back east, and it was like 7 or 8 here, or whatever it was. And Oprah would always refer to the ocean when I go out as my church. She'd be like, "That is your sanctuary." So there's a call, and I think we were on with like the presidents of all these other people. There's all these
of the United States.
Whatever. She's on, but that's a funny story too. But there's
okay.
She was on this call, and I think my COO was on the call. And I get out and my phone is like blown up. It's like, "Where are you? Da da da."
Sure.
Oprah's looking for you.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're like, "Yeah." She goes, "Don't worry about it. I just told them you were at church. You'd be out at 8:30. And she just knew. And she just knew not to call me. And still to this day, every so often, she'll just send me a nice little text. "How's church this morning?" And I'll be like, "It's beautiful." And it turned out to be a gorgeous thing. So that's how the fusion of this thing, and I talk about it a lot, it's like you just never know what is the one thing that just opens you up and lights you up. And it lit me up.
Did you feel like you had to make some changes as you started surfing? Was there like some epiphanies, some sort of like, did it jar your life in any way as you sort of went to church regularly?
Well, it depends, because church service takes on many forms. Sometimes it's really big. It can scare you. it actually changed me in a way that it reminds me that there are things in life that are much bigger than you. You know, the single biggest thing I say to myself about the ocean is that it reminds me that there are things beyond yourself. We are just a small piece of a much larger mosaic of life. And when you sit out into an ocean and forget that there's a wave, you feel very small, and it grounds you. And so to me, it's a grounding mechanism. You know, in my busy life, it is how I connect with myself, and it's how I always stay centered and grounded. So that to me is the reoccurring theme that comes to me. My frustration, my desire, my work, everything intersects into that place. And a good day and a bad day. So you can't actually dictate to the ocean what you'd want to do. As a driver in your career, you were in control of a car. The track wasn't moving. If you missed your mark, that's on you. Mm-hmm. With a wave, the wave's going to do what the wave's going to do. So you are purely having to surrender and get into a flow state if you want to do what you want to do. And I think that metaphor through life and business is just such a good one to keep in mind. And so surfing for me helps remind me of that.
What has been the hardest thing that you've had to just surrender to in that lesson?
My ego.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, and it's an hourly struggle. Sometimes minute struggle. It's hard. And so the thing for me is trusting the universe and trusting, flow and learning that things that are happening to you are always happening for you. Somebody we both know says that. And it's a hard lesson to learn. And I think that, I try to find things in my life that can always reaffirm that in my business life, in my personal life with my daughters, and certainly when I have a spare time to go for a paddle. I only have to be in the ocean for 5 or 10 minutes. I don't need to be out there all day. I just need to be out there, and it just reconnects me and it regrounds me, and I'm good.
It's like your meditation too.
It's 1,000%.
Your church or your meditation. It's grounding. It's resetting.
Yeah.
It can take on whatever modality to achieve it.
That you want.
Being from Oklahoma seems pretty classic Christian. Was that the upbringing you had?
So interestingly, I was raised more Protestant.
Okay.
I was very lost, had a very interesting, troubled childhood with my parents.
Oh, do tell.
6th grade, a friend of mine took me to Catholic Mass for the first time.
Okay.
And I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the Catholic Church. And so I just stopped going to a Protestant church and started going to a Catholic church. Huh. And I realized later that it was the structure of Catholicism that I loved. So I hustled, I got confirmed, I did everything, and I converted to become a Catholic. And so I did that through 6th grade, through high school, through a little bit of college, started working. And then I just sort of wandered off. And I would say, today, I believe in higher callings. I believe in higher spirituality. I believe in higher connection, but I'm not a practicing, Catholic today. But I wasn't really raised with the more like very rigid, dogmatic view that some people would think. I mean, Oklahoma's got an identity crisis as a state. Like,
does it?
Yeah, well, you're not the South, you're not the North.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so
it's not the Midwest. I mean, you're a Midwest girl.
I am.
Yeah.
And what do you consider it, or is it just sort of like, is it a swing vote? You just
it's a swing vote. So if you and I were out at a dinner and you were saying you're from the Midwest, I would say I'm from the Midwest too, and I would declare Oklahoma the Midwest. If I'm out with somebody else and they're from Alabama and they're from the South, I'm like, hey, we're the South too.
What?
So we're very utopian that way.
Wow.
Yeah. They refer to it as the
Switzerland.
Totally, 100%. Us Okies are a funny breed.
What, especially being exposed to Oprah for so long, and what were some of those things, what were some gems that you learned?
From her?
Yeah.
So the thing one of the single biggest lessons that I've taken from her that I use today at the World Surf League is the value of intention. And she talks often about making sure that every conversation, every situation you do, every show had an intention. And so much so, like decade I worked for her, and picks up the phone, it would be, what's the intention of this call?
Really?
100%. And if you don't understand what is actually meant by the statement or question, it can be very off-putting.
Yeah.
You know, people be like, if I, imagine me just roll up and be, hey, what's the intention of this interview? You'd be like, excuse me? Versus,
yeah, I can see that.
Versus it's sort of like, I just want to make sure we're aligned so I can hear you the right way. And oftentimes in life and in business that I have found is like, you've been a part of these conversations, we all have, where like 20 minutes into a meeting, you have this like thought bubble, like, what is happening? Why am I talking to you? Who are you? I mean, you may have that moment here shortly, possibly.
I was thinking you might have that moment. Like, she knows nothing about surfing.
No, you know more than you think. But the lesson of that is like always returning to the intention. And then, you have, certainly with the network, we went through a very well documented phase of struggle. And in order to turn the network around with her name on the door, everything that we did, we had to look back, and we started with the question of like, what was the intention of that show? What was the intention of this? And then what we do, because then you have results or whatever it is, you're able to look and understand it along the way. So that connects to this other piece where we used to always talking about what are the lessons that you get, the lessons along the way. And, the world comes to us in a series of lessons. They're small, and they get louder, then they get bigger.
Because you're not listening.
And so if you understand intention, and then you see the lessons along the way, and once you get those lessons, they stop happening. And so that sort of meant, so that is a lot of the conversations that we'd have. It's not like, I'm not whipping out a P&L and being like, all right, here's where we are in the sub fees, and here's the ad revenue and the CPMs and the cash flows. She certainly is into that, but we spent a lot of time, she and I, and a lot of time with our creative team focusing on these sort of spaces, which, honestly, Danica, changed me how I run companies. I've been running companies most of my life. It changed forever how I run it. And I run the World Surf League the same way.
I want to get back to the ego.
Go ahead. Let's do it.
I just think it's a thing. I think it's especially with men, but it just comes off in a more masculine way. It's just a little more aggressive at times. It's a little less encouraged to get in touch with your feelings. Have you ever cried out there in the ocean? Do you cry ever?
Cry a lot, actually.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for admitting that.
Yeah.
But I just think, I don't know, maybe you can tell me your perspective, but on sort of where we're at as a culture and the world right now. But I feel like dissolving the ego is of the utmost importance in what's going on in the world. How do you feel about all that?
Well, I think at the end, first of all, everybody has to acknowledge that you have one.
Or a healthy ego. Maybe I should be like a little caveat here. A healthy relationship with the ego.
Yeah, I think that's the second part. I think the first part is that there are people who I've come across, I'm sure you have too. It's like, I don't have an ego. And it's like, okay, don't you understand by virtue of the fact of the statement you do? And understanding, hearing your ego speak, to me has been one that, this for me has been the hardest lesson for me to get, because oftentimes when you're either thrust in the media or you're built up on a pedestal or you're told that you are something, you believe it, and then you perpetuate the story yourself. And then you use that as your own self-validation. And then you as a person use that as a way to justify things, either good behaviors or bad behaviors that you want to do. And so that is how at times it manifests itself inside of me. I think for all of us to be able to understand how your ego manifests inside of yourself can dramatically change how the world sees you. And I think that we have a lot of factors. I've got teenage daughters, so I see this like playing out in front of my eyes. On the weeks that I have my girls, I see them. It's all about appearance and the social media and how it looks and all these sort of things. And again, the way I interpret that, that's all about feeding the ego monster, because it's all about that self-validation of how many likes do you have, and you have this. And of course it feels good. Of course it feels great. But it feels great to who? To me, I interpret that it feels good to my ego. And it's sort of like, great article. That feels good. I think that there is a very real issue in terms of people coming to terms with that, the way it's being represented, in terms of the world today. It's hard. And I don't have an answer for it because I'm struggling with it with my daughters, who are very much into this world. And I see it from an interesting point of view with teenage girls. And so part of the reason why I cry a lot too. They keep me very humble.
Oh God, I think I made my dad cry a lot too.
Maybe you can give me some tips
before
we're done.
I don't know. You have to go through the shit. At the end of the day, I mean, lessons have to be learned the hard way sometimes, a lot of times. Is there a check-in? Is there certain things that you've learned that help you to know when you're sort of more in that ego space versus not?
It comes to me when something happens like, damn, why'd that happen? So I drop a glass.
Okay.
My daughter barks at me, which I've learned not to make that about the ego because that's what 15 and 16 looks like. So put that aside. Car almost pulls, sometimes I have these like, either I hit my head, I stub my toe. It's things like that. I can't find my car keys. Things like that. It's like, I look at those moments and it's a trigger for me and it's very hard and I'm not very good at it, but I try to be like, let's check in with myself. What's going on? Just shut everything down. Just stop and go, okay, what's happening? Why'd that happen? Sometimes I look at it this way. It's like I'm running late. I got to get someplace. And then you get going and maybe there's a car accident that happened 4 blocks in front of you. And the universe actually did that to you on purpose to protect you. That's the way I look at these things.
Well, I thought it was double punishment. You're late and they made a car accident there. So they're like, are we driving this home enough that you need to be on time?
Or you can look at it from a point of view that, it is actually working to your benefit. The universe is working to your benefit. Check in with yourself. And so it's hard. And I sometimes try to be very aware that when I get into the place where I feel like I'm elevated and my energy is like very, very high and I'm vibrating very high and I'm talking very fast and I'm just going and going and I'm really
a little frantic.
And you're like, okay, check in with yourself. Slow down. Why is that happening? That's to me how the ego starts to build itself up around myself.
What's the loudest, most difficult lesson that the universe has sent you?
Ooh. Probably losing both my parents. And there were so many unresolved issues, with both of my parents from Oklahoma for a variety of reasons, which, we don't need to do a legacy series of your podcast. You only have an hour.
All of our issues come from childhood.
Yeah, they all come from childhood.
So,
and it was like, I'd always would put off the hard conversations. I'd always put off the forgiveness conversations. I'd always put off with my, I'd always put them off, and
just to keep the peace,
yeah. And it was just like, it is always, it's like you can find 100 reasons not to do one thing. I can come up with a million reasons why I don't want to call somebody. I can come up and it's like, all right, my mom's in Oklahoma. My dad's here. They're divorced. I've got to, I got to call somebody. I got to do something. I don't have time to go back. I mean, there's always
Oprah needs me.
Oprah needs me. There's the waves are pumping. There's
Ocean
always,
needs me.
Ocean needs me. Danica needs me.
Can't be late for church.
Yeah, can't be late for
6:47 this morning.
And so, it losing my mother first actually helped me start to address issues with my dad. Then my dad died shortly thereafter, coincidentally. I mean, they had been divorced. And my brother and I both had this conversation. It was just like, okay. And he and I started talking more, which hadn't really sort of happened. And so I would say that it was, don't put off the hard conversations, have the hard conversations, do the work, have the hard work. And that's a very personal one for me. There's 100 business ones I'm sure I could come up with if I thought about it. But I just, the first thing that pops to mind when you ask the question.
Obviously, I mean, I only just met you, but I get the sense that the work all stems from the spiritual element. It all stems from heart space. It all stems from intention. It all stems from a deeper place than P&Ls and making money. And that just happens naturally.
It's a byproduct. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How did that, though, transfer into work? So I think that you said, obviously you learned the lesson from your parents passing, but that means that you learned a lesson. And that doesn't stop at just, well, my next set of parents I'm going to treat. You know what I mean? Like it goes somewhere.
Yeah.
Probably everywhere.
It goes everywhere. I mean, I think it gives you, for me, it really, I was already, because they both had been diagnosed, so I knew that they were going to get sick, and that the realization of that journey is happening of hospice and things of that nature. You're like, okay, I got to start getting my mind around that. But look, I mean, I think age plays a big part of it too. I mean, ego when you're 20, ego when you're 30, then when you get into 40, it takes on different coats. It changes. It's not the same. It means different things at different points in your life. And I would say that the intersection of my personal life and my professional life, especially when my first daughter was born, became one and the same, and actually was different. Prior to that, I mean, I've been working professionally since I was 15, flunked out of college, barely graduated high school, worked all through my life. And so
and then you were a DJ for a while.
Yeah. And so that's all I knew.
Chuck the Duck.
Chucker.
Chuck
the Duck, yeah. That's when I met Scott, by the way, when I was a mascot. FYI, a friend, mutual
we both
friend.
love country music. We can talk about
that.
Oh,
we can. Well, we can do that in a minute. But it was so wrapped up in my identity of like who I was and what I did, and my ego would be like, you have to portray yourself as something that you're not, And it was like I was a very insecure, not successful student, was terrible at sports and athletics, but yet, I'm a DJ, I'm on the television now, I changed my last name, so Logan's not like my real last name. I created this whole persona of a person that I wanted to be. That's not who I really was as a kid. And at a certain point, those two parallel lines of your personal life and your professional life ultimately fuse together. And you actually become a more deeper, loving, open person when you actually see the symbiotic nature of both of them becoming one. That was the struggle for most of my 30s. And it wasn't really until I had my second daughter and then I hit my 40s that I really realized it came together. And maybe some help with Oprah, who knows?
I feel like we're seeing this shift in society. It makes me really think about the face of television.
Yeah.
Like when you look at something like what Oprah has done and that you helped her create, helped fulfill her vision, be part of that, that sort of a network changes the landscape of content. Did you guys feel like that?
There was many times we didn't. It was, we started the network when we launched it in 2011 on January 1st with the idea that we were going to take the fundamental pieces of what made the Oprah show successful and do that as a cable network.
Makes sense.
Seems like a good idea. And what we realized was that we did not appropriately think about the audience that was sitting there for pay cable. Because she had a platform at that point in time for 24 years on free broadcast air. And she always was on at 4 o'clock everywhere in the country, except for one market, by the way.
Oh, Arizona? Oklahoma?
No, Chicago.
Chicago.
Yeah, she was on in the morning. Chicago was the only market in America that the Oprah show was not on at 4 o'clock. And it was because that's when it first started when she was on WLS. And she did not want those viewers to have to move. So that was when we would do all the syndication deals. It was like, yep, but Chicago at 11. Just more little cocktail trivia.
How fun.
But when we started the network, we thought a lot about, from an intentional point of view, we take the elements of the show, but it didn't connect with the audience, didn't connect with the viewers.
Which was what? Like if you were to say, like, we really focused on these things.
Health, wellness.
That didn't register?
And here's why. The landscape of cable network and really is different than broadcast. And get the core word, broadcast, broad. So if you watch ABC from top to bottom, it's everything from Good Morning America to soap operas to talk shows to drama. It's this broad.
News.
Right. If you think about cable networks, they're very, very narrow. So the analogy I used when I was running the network was, look, broadcasts are a mile wide and a foot deep. Successful cable networks are an inch wide and 5 miles deep. CNN, boom. CNBC, boom. So what we were trying to do with the beginning parts of the network.
Good at your job.
was supposed to be broad. So we narrowed it down and we focused on really trying to fulfill a void that we identified, that what cable and what certainly the United States hadn't seen are powerful images of African American women portrayed in the appropriate way. And we would always say that images matter, and she would drill that into our head. And so we always had to make sure we were putting the aspirational and the proper images and having the real conversations that were happening. And the show that sort of broke it through for us was a show called Welcome to Sweetie Pies, which hit in the fall of 2011. And we bought it from a friend that I still friend with today, again, Craig Pulagian, Pilgrim. And the show was fundamentally about this woman. Her name was Miss Robbie. She owned a soul food restaurant in St. Louis, Missouri. It's great, right up our alley. You and I would love it, by the way. Been there many times. And she had a son. She was a backup singer for Ike and Tina Turner, by the way. She had a son fatherless son, father left, huge issue in the African American community about boys who don't have fathers, was imprisoned, and she's trying to start a business. And so we did a reality show about this dynamic, and it exploded on the network. And the intention of it was that we were going to put forth great imagery, but what we learned upon intention, and the lessons we learned, good and bad, was that we needed to have this conversation with the community. And so we started having these conversations. And then the next show was Iyanla Van Zandt. And it was about Iyanla Van Zandt having these conversations with women and men. And so what happened was, as we sort of found our footing, and then we were able to develop against it. Now I look at the job that the network's done, over the past 2 years. It's tremendous. I mean, they've got this amazing Own Your Vote campaign, and Tina Perry, who's the president of the network now, has done a miraculous job. They've got great dating shows, and they've created this beautiful, very narrow, but extraordinarily deep niche, and that's why the network's successful.
Is this the model used by, would you say, all cable?
Well,
or does anybody else, I never heard it described like that. But I guess I look at it like, there's no health and, where's the health and wellness otherwise?
Yeah, it's sort of spread, depending upon where it goes. Like if you go to like a Food Network, it's sort of a through line through there, So like, for example, we were part of the Discovery Network. HGTV has a lot of wellness things that are in there in that way. And a lot of the audiences that are really focused on wellness will go find it. Now in the digital world, they'll find it through whether it's their Peloton or their SoulCycle bike or wherever it may be. Cable is very challenged today with what's going on with cord cutting. It's very, very challenged.
I'm super curious what your thoughts are on where TV is going.
Oh, yeah, but I've got it. Yeah, well,
I know you're surfing these days, but there's also ROI there's how do you make money in surfing? So television might be a part of that, but
it is. It totally is. The cable landscape is such that you have more and more choice. And, when I was running OWN, we could see the oncoming of, what we'd call the streamers. Netflix was coming at scale. Hulu was getting at scale. Disney Plus hadn't launched yet. But you wake up today, you think about all the choices that you've got. It's everywhere. And so there's been a debundling of content for the consumers. So the consumers have demanded choice. So Danica has said, I want to choose what I want to watch. I don't want to pay you, large cable company, a lot of money for 700 channels. I want this, I want that. So that's what has happened. And so that creates pressure to the established guard, the old cable networks, creates opportunity for the new guards, which are the streamers. And if you're a content creator like we are, or even like how she is, Oprah, it provides opportunity for you to tell very focused, niche stories in the way that is good for your business. So in our case, for the World Surf League, we have a television show that will premiere next year on ABC. That's a reality-based competition show with 7 men and 7 women, shot at our surf ranch facility, which I'm inviting you to, by the way, in Wilmore, California.
I would love to learn how to surf, actually.
Let's go. You and I will be there before you know it. That's why I asked when you were leaving.
Next trip getting planned.
But what they'll do is they'll compete for a spot on our world tour. Then we have documentaries about people like Kelly Slater that we're taking out. We have other shows that we're creating about our sport and about surfing. And I can now take advantage of this debundling and actually put our sport intentionally with content telling the stories where I want to tell them. All of that anchors back strategically to the fact that we have a world tour and we put on a professional sport.
So is it going on cable, or is it going on a streamer,
So
or you're
that one's
able
on
to
broadcast.
sprinkle it? Like,
Well, it depends on the shows. Like Ultimate Surfer's on ABC. So Ultimate Surfer's
Yeah.
going on the broadcast here in
Yep.
the United States.
Yep.
The documentaries will be depending upon what we did. For example, we did a great documentary 247, that HBO series with Kelly. We did that when he was going into Haleiwa, the Triple Crown in Hawaii last year. Actually won 3 Emmys for Kelly. That's good for him. It's good to be the king.
Cool.
Good to be Kelly Slater.
He's pretty versatile. That guy.
He's pretty versatile.
Yeah.
But I think that the content landscape allows that, even in the audio space for like yourself with pods,
Yeah.
video pods, and everything that's happening. It's really about, from an intention point of view, how do you want to convey your message, and how more focused you get, actually you can create more skill for yourself in that way. So when I think about content strategy, I think about what do you want to say and where do you want to put it?
Are they all going to live?
Probably not. I think that,
Who's dying first?
well, I'm not going to give away my stock tips yet, but
It's cable.
oh, cable. Yeah.
I mean, if
I
I'm
thought you
going
were
to
talking about the
guess,
streamers. Yeah.
that too. But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think
It
you're
just-
going to see a contraction for sure of a lot of these cable networks. You're already starting to see them start contracting down to a place where you can't afford to run them because they're to a large part they're subsidized by subscribers.
right.
So if the subscribers for a cable provider are trending down, there's not the revenue coming back
Right.
in for the cable network. So
Right.
that what happened, and then that's why you see all of these other things. Think about it. Do you know what Pluto is? Have you heard of Pluto? Have you heard of Philo?
It's not even a planet anymore. What do
No,
you
it's
mean?
an app on your Apple TV that you can watch free television on.
Really?
Yes. All of these things are popping up to give consumers more choice, which just puts more pressure on the old establishment guard. And again, to survive sort of this great unbundling of what's happening, you have to actually focus on the consumer. You got to think about it from your choice. It's like, okay, consumer has choice. Where are they going to go? And then what's your value proposition to the consumer?
So it's a better time than ever for a consumer.
1,000,000%. It's the best time to be a consumer if you love content, because they're all vying for your eyeballs.
What do you watch?
What do I watch?
What platforms do you use to watch things, and what do you watch?
I'm like the worst person to ask a question because I have all of them. I just finished.
Naturally.
I finished a great one on HBO Max called "Raised by Wolves." It's a sci-fi crazy one. Ridley Scott did it. It's really, really good. And I'm starting J.J. Abrams' new one on HBO Max probably this weekend. And then what's actually been more fun for me, honestly, has been that I'm now into season 6 from 4 years ago of Dance Moms, because my daughters have discovered Dance Moms. I now realize where JoJo Siwa came from.
I love the honesty. I love it.
Yeah. So that's last night was Dance Moms for a while.
So do you watch a lot of TV?
Not as much as you'd think.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have to say you watch a lot of TV?
I feel like there are a lot of people you have to say that. Do you watch a lot of content? I'm like, no, I really don't. I like to read.
Because I don't watch the news anymore. I watch YouTube videos. That's my most common thing. It's actually my morning news. I stopped watching the news and I started like listening to like Abraham Hicks like videos and Wayne Dyer and all that. Super Soul Sunday, God, the amount of Super Soul Sunday shorts that I've cried to. Letter from the dog. God.
Stop it.
Yeah. But yeah, that's my news. So I don't. But
So
I would imagine you feel like you have to say you watch a lot of TV.
I do. A lot of people will always ask me that. A lot of people will be like, "What do you watch? And what have you watched recently?" So I don't force myself to watch anything.
Would you say that you watch less than you used to?
For sure.
Why?
For sure.
When it's a better time than ever.
Because for me, I don't need to. I don't feel like I'm obligated to. And
so you never wanted to, maybe? Then
yeah,
before?
it was like work for me.
Okay.
It was like I had to watch like that show or this show. So for me, it's more of like, hey, if that speaks to me, I want to get invested in it.
Got it.
If it doesn't speak to me, I don't want to get invested. Now, there are a lot of stuff that, like for our studio, we have at the World Surf League, we have a studio that makes a lot of content. I watch a lot of that because I need to note it or edit it, or like the notes for some of our shows, I'll do that. So, but that to me is work. That doesn't sort of count. I think the question's more, discretionary. It's like if I have an hour, I'm on the couch, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you normally do then?
So I like to read. I attempt at least 4 or 5 conversations with my daughters. That gets, and that,
how many actually go on to being a conversation?
Not many. It flies in and out based upon this. And sometimes, believe it or not, it's like, well, first of all, I've been banned from TikTok. I'm not allowed to have TikTok.
Yeah, you're too. Yeah, sorry, you're too old for TikTok.
Too old for TikTok. But a lot of times they'll just
I'm too old for TikTok.
They'll throw it up, and I'll just sit and watch them, and I'll just like voyeuristically see what they're watching on TikTok, and it's sort of like I honestly get plugged into a really important part of the culture. It's like, and this I looked at it now. I flipped it. I used to be annoyed by it, like phones down at dinner, and you talk to me, and I want to hear about your day. Versus, no, I need to flip it because it would be better for me to lean into that and be part of it, hear about it, have them open up more. And then what happens as a part of that is that A, you get more of a connection with them, which I have. And then B, I'm actually like looking at it going, oh, okay, surfing's a very young sport anyway. I mean, some of our upcoming professional surfers are the same age as my daughter. And it's like, they're doing the same thing. And it's like, now it's a little bit, I look at it a little bit like market research.
I was going to say insight.
It's insight, totally. And it's funny, like our mutual friend, Scott, Borchetta, who runs Big Machine, often is godfather of my oldest daughter. Oh, really? He will call out of the blue and say, okay, what are the girls listening to? And because they'll find stuff on TikTok at the time, Musical.ly or YouTube, and he would just call randomly and just ask them what they're listening to. And again, when he was starting to do that, it's sort of like, oh, because Scott's much smarter than I am. I'm like, oh, okay, I see what he's doing.
You're very nice.
I see what he's doing.
You both have accomplished a tremendous amount.
He's a good egg.
Huh. What kind of books do you like to read?
Business books.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a novelist.
You like learning. So either you're watching TV to learn for work or you're reading to learn.
I love to learn. Yeah.
So business books, not spiritual or not...
I have a couple that are spiritual. My favorite spiritual book is Mark Nepo's.
I haven't even heard of that.
So Mark Nepo. And what he does is he has 365 passages each day. You read a different passage. So you start the book for a year, and they're short passages and they're very intention laden. I'll get you a copy. It's a good one. And he was on a Super Soul Sunday. You can go find it. That was one of the best ones. And then I've read a couple of Eckhart's books, which, if you want to talk to PhD in ego, he's the guy to talk to for sure.
My favorite thing is listening to him giggle.
He's very
I don't know what you think about that, but it's like this whole, like, you guys just don't get it.
Yep. That's Eckhart.
And it really is so soothing. This voice, it goes like this.
They talk about the ego, and Danica, the ego, come at you like this. He has it almost puts me to sleep when he talks.
Yeah.
I tried listening to an audiobook, and like 4 minutes into it, I was like zonked out. So.
It's those nights where there's sleepless nights where you can't get to sleep or you can't stay
100%.
asleep, and just put that on. I've actually done that with Wayne Dyer.
Yep.
There's been some life crap that's gone on, and I'm like, I just can't sleep right now, and I'll put something Wayne Dyer on, and I love his voice too.
Yep.
It's not quite as
it's not soothing.
Not quite as soothing as Eckhart's, but it's a little more content, and I keep thinking maybe I'm getting some subconscious mental soap.
Speaking to your soul, right directly into it. You just don't even know.
Yeah.
He does that. But no, I'll do those, and then the business books. I just finished Reed's book from Netflix, who's the CEO of Netflix. Interesting book about culture, because they have one of the most interesting cultures that's out there. Netflix does. Reed Hastings is his name, and it's called.
When you say culture, like
business culture.
Oh, okay.
About how they run the company. They don't have expense reports. They do things like keeper tests. They pay people. It's a very dog eat dog culture, and he talks about why he approaches it that way. And an interesting point of view. What he did was, which I loved about this approach of the book, was he said to this woman, her name was Erin, I can't remember her last name. She was a Harvard PhD. She wrote the book on culture, but he's a big fan of hers. And he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a book, and then he gave this woman free access to talk to any employee she wanted to at Netflix to find out if what he was saying about what he thought the culture was actually true. And so he would make a point about like the keeper test or something, and Erin would then have all these different counterpoints based upon what the employees were actually saying. So it's just it was such a wonderful.
Was it in sync?
It was very much in sync, and it was very transparent. And what I really appreciated about it was like, I mean, you talk about surrendering of the ego. It's like, here's a CEO of a massively huge company. Like, hey, I'm going to tell you what it is. Go talk to anybody you want to. It was really powerful. So
wow.
So books like that, or biographies like Walter Isaacson writes about Steve Jobs. I like stuff like that. So
why'd you take the job with World Surf League? Why?
Great question. Perfect question. So at the time, a couple things were going on at OWN. So we had turned the network around. It was an amazing turnaround, literally from death's doornail. I mean, the network was losing a lot of money. Oprah was being drugged through the press in an amazingly terrible way. So that was 2012. We turned it around in 2013, became profitable, had a lot of success with Greenleaf and some of our other shows. And then I was at the end of a deal of my contract, and I had just done a deal with her, and she started doing her Apple conversation. So the Apple conversation started happening, and she was expanding beyond where the cable network was. And we were in this really interesting time, back to the conversation about consumer choice and cable and the pressures. And the platform was only going to be able to grow to a certain point, and the platform wasn't going to be able to grow much beyond where it was. And so she was looking for other ways, and that's why what she was doing with Weight Watchers and like with the tour and these platforms, and she's always looking for new places to innovate how to put her message out. That's what she did with the Oprah show. That's what she did with OWN. That's what she did with O Magazine. And we were at this place, and my job was at the time the cable network, and I had fallen in love with surfing, and I loved surfing. And there was an interesting opportunity. She introduced me to the owner of the World Surf League, sort of on this like a blind date kind of thing. Like, you should meet this guy.
It's the universe.
It was, and I didn't know who it was. She goes, I'm on a boat with a guy that we were talking surfing. I go, you got to talk to my president, CEO. It's all he does is talk about surfing. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm emailing this guy. I have no idea who it is. Like, what board do you like? This, that, and I'm like, who is this guy? I have no idea. And I said, well, what are you doing surfing? I had no clue. He goes, well, I own the World Surf League. And then I called Oprah, and she goes, I told you it was a good hookup. I'm like, holy cow. So Dirk and I developed a relationship, and one thing led to another. And he said, hey, we're thinking about starting a studio. And the time felt right. We had turned the network around. I said, this would be fun. I would be able to just focus on content. Not that I was going to retire, but it was sort of like, this would be a fun challenge to build a studio around surfing, leverage everything I've learned in TV, and just do it around surfing, my passion. And so, I walked into her office one afternoon, and she was there, and said, do you have a minute? I go, yeah. And so we shut the door, and we had this little joke. It was like, oh, it's a door closer. I go, it's a door closer.
And it's only going to take a minute.
Let's close the door. And I sat down, and I said, it's time. And she had no idea what I was saying. And she goes, it's time? I go, it's time. She goes, it's time. And I told her.
Did she get it when she said, it's time? Okay, got it. It took her the second. Okay.
She got it. And she smiled, and she lit up. And she's like, this is a beautiful moment for you.
Oh.
Yeah, it was great. It was exactly what you would imagine her to say.
Oh.
And then she walked around the desk, gave me a big hug. And she goes, it's divine. This is the way it's supposed to be. And
so glad to hear Oprah's is greatest,
No, I mean, she is, Danica. She really is. And then I'm there for a year, and then a year after that, I'm now the CEO.
So then it leads me to kind of what I'm curious about, and it's what you think your purpose is.
What do I think my purpose is? I think it's evolved. I think my purpose, and I'll give you a couple of different answers, and they probably intersect. I love trying to find ways to bring out the best in other people. I try to be a very selfless person. I try to focus a lot on my daughters because, they're out the door in 3 years, and, the time with them is shrinking, and, not to sound
they
like...
come back, I promise. I went and lived with my parents this summer for 3 months. They come back.
Yeah, well, but you're off the payroll. I'm more.
Yeah,
you're
definitely.
You're definitely off the payroll, right? But so I think it's from that perspective. So for me, it's like I like seeing other people achieve things they didn't think was possible.
Mm-hmm.
I like having people believe in things that are bigger than themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back at when I reflect back, take surfing out of it, but all the surfing where the WSL is actually a very interesting inflection point. It's the same way, but OWN was a complete, was a problem. You know, when I was running XM, it was a startup, and no one thought we ever could get people to pay for radio, and we did. And when we built that company, it was the same way. And then all the radio stations and all the country stuff, they were all like, you can't go at 23 to move to Seattle and be this. You can't do. And so a lot of my pathology in my life had been, you can't. And what I realized was I was proving something to myself. But then what I actually realized that the joy came from actually watching other people see things that they can't see, having them believe in the fact that we could do this and believe in the fact that we were going to do this. And then seeing that happen was like more fulfilling to me than anything else. And so I like that. I like trying to be the connector, the facilitator. I never think I'm the smartest person in the room. I believe everybody else is smarter. I try to be the one that sort of like brings it together and then allows the alchemist to happen. And I try to do that with my family.
Also a great book.
It's a great book too. Colo, not a bad one.
Yeah. So then, well, how are you trying to use surfing as the medium to fulfill this purpose?
For myself?
Yeah.
Well,
or are you?
I am actually. I think on two different paths. I think for me personally, it is about, can I take what I've learned in my professional career and apply that to something extraordinarily foreign, you know?
Yep.
And it's like, what an interesting challenge. You know, it's sort of spirituality, surfing, country radio, Chuck the Duck, XM satellite radio. Okay, I can take all that and can I put this into a surfing modality? Interesting challenge. And I think that a higher altitude challenge for me with the company is trying to see or convey beyond just the sheer talent that we have of our surfers and all that we do from professional side, that this sport, global sport that happens around the planet, actually the people who participate in it, the participatory, not just the athletes, but the participants, do it for reasons that sometimes they can't see themselves, but there's something beyond it. Mm. And I think it's a lofty challenge and a goal for me to help people understand that and see that. Because I look at a sport that took a kid from Oklahoma that couldn't swim to do what I've been able to do. It shifted me. And I'm a really good example of what I think that sport can do. And I see a lot of people who speak in terms that they don't have the nomenclature, they don't have the framework, the thinking, the experience, the way to articulate it the way that I can. And the only reason why I can articulate it is I spent 10 years next to somebody that taught me how to articulate it. So I was able to fuse the two things together. And for me, I think that that is an amazing way to sort of connect two really, really important worlds. Passion over on one side and purpose on the other. And, you know, I say oftentimes, for me, it's like, I feel so blessed to have an opportunity right now, and it won't last forever, to marry my passion and purpose. It's like, you know, you got profession, passion, and purpose, you can bring those all together. It's hard. It's really, really hard to do that. And I'm very, very lucky to do it. So I try to stay very present with that.
There's so much integrity there. That's brave, right? Because it could be probably easy to take shortcuts and just like, you know how to make something big or make money or just go surfing, right? But then to put them together is a venture. So you want to inspire people to, you know, be able to believe in something beyond, to do more, to accomplish more. So how are you going to do that? What can I take away if I watch and where? So I'll watch it on ABC.
Yeah, you'll watch Ultimate Surfer there.
Ultimate Surfer comes out at the beginning of the year in 2021. And then there's going to be some documentaries.
Or we'll be surfing in Hawaii, you know, at the end of the year for the tour will come back. Yeah. Then we have our big wave tour to come back. You know, and part of it is sequential. You know, so one of the things I learned in content in the own space was a term that I used to always talk about called hide the spinach. Hide the spinach.
Well, the smoothie still turns green, so you got to use a colored cup.
So it's true. So make it black, right?
Yeah.
That, you know, doing Super Soul Sunday, your favorite show, has a very narrow audience because it's very focused on that. A broader audience was watching like the Oprah show, right?
Right.
Okay. So what Oprah was ingenious at doing was having people using a star like yourself to come sit on the show and have a conversation because people wanted to hear about you and your racing career and you're the first women to do this and oh my God, most successful IndyCar driver, all that. People like, oh, Danica. And then what she'd do is she'd get people to the television and then she'd have a conversation about spirituality and she'd thread it through, right? Okay. So that to me is what I refer to as hiding the spinach. And so when we can do things in our broadcast about a program like Rising Tides, about how we get young kids and women and girls to start learning about the surf, or talk stories about indigenous people, talk about what's happening with very huge issues in our country with social justice, or in Australia with the what's happening in terms of the stolen generation, or South Africa with apartheid, or whatever it may be, that if I have a platform of surfers, I can tell these stories through there. And so how do we figure out a way to elevate the narrative in a way that brings it to light while you at the same time are watching Kelly Slater out of a barrel at J-Bay and take advantage of it. So, that's a heavy lift. It's a hard thing. You have to be very intentional about it, but it's that's higher. That's the higher vibration that I'm trying to get us to.
This really resonates with me. I don't know if it will with you, but you are completely paralleling you going surfing. It is entertaining lessons. You are creating entertaining lessons.
Good chat. I'm gonna steal that. Entertaining lessons.
I got a lot of time on my hands. You need me for anything?
Yeah, so no, I'm trying to get you to go to the surf ranch.
Okay, we'll start there.
We'll start at the surf ranch.
Some entertaining lessons, and then we see where it goes from there.
That's a perfect place for us to start.
What a cool venture. I'm so happy for you. And I don't know how you feel, but there's a magic in the passion.
Well, that's the fuel for anyone, I hope. Certainly for me, that the passion of what I'm doing, for me, that's what drives me. Because it's hard. I have awful days, like we all do, And, I'm like, okay, well, why am I doing this? It's certainly through this pandemic, I've asked that question a lot. And that's, again, it's the self-doubt. It's the struggle we all have. And to not be honest about it is not being authentic. But it's like, I have bad days just like everybody else. And you asked if I cry. So yeah, there's just days. It's like, it's just too hard. It's just hard.
That's actually one final thought I want you to unpack, because I think this is really a powerful concept that I have felt like has played into my life, but I think it resonates because I've read it from you, and that's the word beleif, believing.
Believing.
It's like simple to just say, I believe it's going to happen, but can you try and explain believing in a way that will help someone know how to?
For me, when I say I believe we're going to do something, it is a statement of knowing that through the fiber of my body, there's not a doubt. And it's almost, when you get the chicken skin sometimes, and you get the little aha things, and you get the little twitches, and there are ways that just sort of happen. For me, it's like when I start talking, I'm very aware that, it just came to me. If it was like an angel whisper or things like that, that's when I know I'm on the right track. And that's when I know that there's something higher that is like, keep going, keep going. So for me, when I'm saying I'm believing, I have done the work of underturning all the rocks. When you are so confident and you believe in your core that is going to absolutely happen, an amazing thing happens. You know what happens to everybody else around you? They believe you. And then they have confidence. And that comes with a heavy backpack of a burden. It comes with a heavy backpack of like, okay, I feel the weight, I've now put that backpack on my back because I'm the one saying it. But if you've got the right team of people and you have the right support, you have the right partners, then that belief becomes a power. And then so you flip it. So I think the way I'd have people try to understand the power of belief is that there is not an ounce of doubt in your mind. And even there is validation, however you choose to see it or feel it or experience it, that reaffirms what that belief is. So that's how that's why when I get on my thing of like, this is what we're going to do.
What if somebody can't get there? Like if I said, I believe I can dunk a basketball.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Clearly I don't. I'm 5'1.5". Like I ain't gonna dunk a basketball ever in my life. But I do actually believe, because I'm a really esoteric thinker, that if I truly actually believed it to my core, I actually think I could.
Yep.
But there's no way, because I believe in reality too much as it's presented.
Sure.
So what happens then because people get stuck.
They get stuck.
So what happens if you can't get there? You can't believe what you need to believe to be successful or to achieve what you want, think you want.
So let's take your example for a second. So you want to dunk a basketball, but you said you believe you can. I'm going to tell you that you can. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to reframe the statement of what you believe in. You can't dunk a 10-foot rim basketball, but if I put a 5-foot rim over here, you could dunk it. So have you now actually dunked it? Yes. So
you're a good boss.
Huh?
You're a good boss.
So to me, it's about framing, the sort of question the right way. And if somebody is stuck, the energy flow being stuck or the connection being stuck needs to be viewed as a signal that you're just on a wrong road. So just choose a different road.
So much easier said than done, though.
It is, but that's the work that I think that people, if someone were to ask me like you and be like, how do you do it? It's like, okay, so, one of the things we used to always practice a lot was that this term, doubt means don't. And it's really, really hard. But in business, I do it a lot. I'm not very good in my personal life, but
we cut from the same cloth then.
Yeah.
I'm really good at business. I'm good at letting go and doing things in relationships. I'm like,
Yeah, exactly. Doubt me. I'm really, I got a lot of work. That's the second podcast. There's a lot of work on that one. But
part two.
But the doubt, but when you get a doubt or you get that, doubt, for me, just say doubt means don't. And then when you start talking about things you believe in until you don't have those feelings, then you're like, okay, that I can believe in.
So even because there's one thing about being a good boss and encouraging people and getting me to dunk a 5-foot hoop, right? I get it. And that's honestly because it's just a shift in mindset, a perception change, a language change. The universe doesn't know the difference, whether it was 5 or 10 feet. But all of a sudden there's a shift in energy there. So now what if you're a boss? What if it's your company? What if it's your job to say we're all going to dunk a basketball, every single one of you, but you're like, God, I know they can't, I know they're, so what happens if you're in that stuck spot and you're the boss? Even harder to run away, right? Because you're a boss, you're probably getting paid well, you're secure. Like, what would you say to that person who's stuck there, that's like successful by, cultural standards, but like emotionally, spiritually, and energetically poor as hell?
Well, I think there's a question attached to that too. So we'll ask the second question and we'll answer that one. So that I think there's if you're the boss and you're saying that and it's not true, you actually have an ego dilemma. It's coming back to your ego thing, right? Full circle. Now we're to full circle, right? Now you're at your ego. And it's sort of like, okay, now how do you want to be viewed in this moment? And so for me, it's like in that moment, what I would say to people is, be humble, be transparent, and be honest. And don't bury the lead. Don't qualify it with a comma. Don't just, put everybody on your Zoom screen and be like, okay, so you know what? No one's dunking a basketball. Let's get honest about it. Let's get very real about that. But here's what I believe we can do. And so by doing that, what happens is you actually become, I think, in my opinion, more powerful. Owning the mistake, owning the narrative, owning your own truth about the matter, and speaking that. Then the people, they go, okay, all right. So here's what we're going to do. And then you reframe it yourself. But sometimes just blind faith for blind faith's sake actually is the worst thing for a company or a culture and a relationship,
Yep.
And so I've lived that. And at a certain point, you just got to is we call the ball and be like, yep, no. And so in this case, in a business framing, for me, it's like, we're not going to be able to start the tour. It's over. Or I made a mistake. Here's how we're going to fix it. I own it. Let's move on. I think everybody is so afraid of saying that, especially leaders. And I would say especially young leaders. This was a hard lesson for me as a young executive, was learning to own that. Is like standing in front of a company and say that you made a mistake. But the sooner you understand that that actually is a powerful thing for you, the more liberating you feel. You become a better leader because you know it's like, hey, if I screw it up, I'm just going to tell you I screwed it up and we're just going to keep going. It's fine.
I am excited. Like I was at this like meditation circle the other night, and you know, it's a bunch of hippies, and I'm like, I can't wait to see the culture and the future of the world when all these little hippie kids grow up, you know, and this sort of transition culturally. But in the same exact vein, I can't wait to see what happens with business and content and the integrity behind it that someone like you is leading the way with, because I think gone are the days, and I think 2020 is dissolving so much of this, where, you know, we can sort of have poor intentions and poor ethics and not be in our heart space and in our own integrity and our own truth, and expect to have any kind of support or longevity or belief, because I think we're all getting energetically a lot more educated and inclined. And that's why you're going to blow up surfing, and I'm going to probably make the league and do cool stuff.
I mean,
you're going to teach me everything I need to know.
That's right. Don't worry. I got you. Listen, I started when I was older than what you are now. So you got a big future ahead of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This has been fun. Thank you so much.
Thanks everybody for listening to the Pretty Intense podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you heard today and you want to hear more, please click on the subscribe button.